Tactics Chess. Today I'll be starting a series on wonderful games that I find and that I would like to share with you guys. They're also very instructional games, so this is a little bit different chess instructional content than I usually produce, but I think it's just as nice and just as helpful for you guys. So today we'll be going over a game by TAL, and his opponent was an international master. Not a very popular player, so I won't really focus on him much. I don't even think I remember his name from this game. But before I start, I'd just like to share a quote by TAL, a very famous one. It is, "There are two types of sacrifices, correct ones and mine." So yeah, a pretty funny quote, but very famous, and it kind of just grasps how TAL plays in just a couple words. So let's go over this wonderful game that has so many nice sacrifices inside of them. So it starts off with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, and bishop b5. TAL goes for the Roy Lopez. So we see the Morphy defense, which is a6. TAL brings his bishop back. And we see the modern Steinitz defense. This is to defend the central pawn, but also keep the option of b5 always open, which breaks the pin and makes TAL have to move his bishop back onto b3. So TAL plays c3. This was the modern theoretical development at that time. This was about 40 years ago when this game was played. Nowadays, short castles is obviously much more theoretically sound, but this was the main theoretical move, and short castles back then was just a novelty. So that's why TAL played this move, c3. So then we see bishop d7, developing the bishop, breaking the pin, d4. TAL wants to create this classical pawn center, and he wants to create a pawn break in the middle. His opponent brings his knight and develops it. TAL, instead of getting space, just remaneuvers his bishop, and he's eyeing down this f7 square. So then we see this move, h6, a prophylactic move. He's trying to prevent TAL from playing this move, bishop g5. So TAL instead plays this move, knight h4. And knight h4 looks like a very, very strange move. Like, it doesn't seem like it accomplishes much, and instead, why didn't TAL just go for short castle? Well, in the surface, knight h4 does not look like a great move, but the meaning behind it is very, very nice. TAL is simply opening up this queen's diagonal and wanting to place his queen onto this f3 square and attack this f7 square again. So here is where his opponent really went wrong, and this is the starting point of where TAL took the initiative and started to win the game. So pay attention. So his opponent goes for the move g4. So g4, he's trying to kick the knight, but the thing is, he misses this wonderful move, queen h5. Instead, his idea could have been to play knight to a5. Then we see bishop c2, and finally, he should have played g5. But instead, he was too hasty and played bishop g5 early, which is an extremely bad move. So we see h5. It's just trying to capitalize and create this direct mating threat on the f7 square. We see the rook to defend. TAL, he captures and this simply wins a pawn, because obviously you can't capture because there is the queen attacking the rook, and you would drop the rook. So simply, his opponent goes for a pawn break in the center, but TAL stops caring about the center and the pawns because he's just trying to go after the king and mate as quickly as possible. So he plays this move, trying to bring his pawn into the center and into the attack. Again, this queen is completely trapped. This was kind of a wasteful move, but I mean, what else can he do? Because this queen is completely trapped behind all these pieces and really can't get out to support the other side of the board. And we see f5, again pushing this pawn, d takes c3, and this was actually a fine move, I guess, but it really doesn't accomplish much for black, and it actually helps white because TAL can simply develop with tempo by grabbing this pawn with the knight. So he brings the other knight into the game. This knight becomes very close to the central lines and attacking again with these other pieces. So we simply see this move, just trying to bring the knight to defend. Then we see the knight going back, kind of the only move in this situation, because obviously he doesn't want to lose. And we see this simple trade, and then the knight comes in again, trying to add to this attack. It looks very, very dangerous right now, as you can see from black's perspective. He simply moves the bishop, but this is again a bad move because TAL can take with check, and the queen has to take, because if the rook takes, we have this wonderful move, check, bishop moves, and pawn takes. So, as you can see, the opponent didn't want to allow that, so he simply took with the king. But as you can see, the king has already lost castling privileges, and after TAL castles, he can bring all of the pieces to this exposed king. So here we see this move, knight d5, simply bringing the knight into the game and trying to attack this king that is very exposed. Then the knight moves to g7, just moving it the king out of the way and trying to create at least some safety, even though the king is already exposed. Then we see castles. TAL's plan is to bring this rook and this rook into the game. That's why he connected the rooks and castled the king. Obviously, this also keeps the king a little bit safe, even though black is not really in a position to attack right now. The precaution is always nice. Instead, his opponent goes for a trade. I don't really understand his opponent's ideas, even from a perspective that I am, which is fairly amateur. Just the practice of exchanging pieces, especially in the endgame where your opponent is clearly better, is not really good. And obviously, when you are up, you should always try to exchange everything so you can create a very simple game and win the game much more simply. And the opponent doesn't have many pieces on the board to complicate things. So instead, the opponent, again, by playing knight f6 makes it easier for TAL. He simply trades, and again he has to capture with the king. So the king is becoming more and more exposed. Just he's running around the board like a pawn or something, which is not very beneficial. Simply TAL takes, and obviously we cannot play king takes, because after this check, the king is very, very exposed, and it'll get attacked by almost all of TAL's pieces. So instead, they decline this trade. And even bishop takes is not very great, because after bishop takes we see a queen check, and then we could take this rook with this nice double attack. So instead he cannot take, so he simply plays the queen trying to attack this knight. The knight trades. This wasn't the best option because obviously knight g6 is better, but I feel like TAL again was just trying to simplify the game and exchange his pieces in this position. So we see takes with the rook, because obviously if we see something like queen takes, we have a very, very solid position, because obviously an engine can defend this, but not a human. This looks completely crushing for white, even if the analysis is maybe 0 or +1. So we see a wonderful move, e5, just checking the king and allowing TAL to get much more exposed ranks, and on the next move he might be able to play something like e1 and pin this dark sword bishop to the queen. So we see pawn takes, again just grabbing up a pawn and checking the king. This king just keeps on wasting time moving around, and TAL goes for the idea I was discussing earlier. He pins this bishop, and again we see a move that is just kind of a defending passive move, which is not what you need to play in this situation. We see another check by TAL, and then a beautiful move. This wonderful, probably the best move of the game. If you want to look at any move, this is probably the highlight. This not only has the simple idea of bringing the rook to the 4th rank and allowing it to get active into the game and support the queen, but also it shows this wonderful rook sacrifice. So yeah, you might be thinking this is a terrible move because after bishop d4 check, which was played in the game, king h1, and black wins the rook, right? Well, on the surface level, it does seem very simple, and it seems like black is much better, but actually this blunders the queen, because after this wonderful sequence, which is takes, queen check, king moves, check by the pawn, and after king takes or queen, obviously you can't take with the king, excuse me, because it is in check. After bishop takes, you have this wonderful exposed queen, and you're capturing, and even after the king moves somewhere, you have this move, rook takes, and then in general you're just completely crushing. So in this position, after he saw this rook sacrifice, the opponent resigned. In general, this was a beautiful game that showed many, many concepts we need to keep in mind. The opening was actually fairly good until the simple blunder of this move that was very hyper aggressive and premature, and you cannot play these moves against TAL because he definitely will find the right continuation. And then we see another theme in this game, which is attacking this f7 square when the opponent is trying to castle kingside. So that's why you need to get your king to safety as soon as possible, especially if you're playing an attacking player like TAL, because he will exploit this center king. As you can see, he did that the whole game, and towards the end of the game, the king was simply running around amok. And the highlight of this game was definitely this beautiful move, which was rook e1 and rook e4. Rook e4 allowed the opponent to create the sacrifice, but it also, even if he wanted to decline the sacrifice, gave him an active square to attack from and support the queen. In general, this was a wonderful game, and I'm so happy I was able to share it with you guys. If you like this game, I recommend that you subscribe and share this video so you can keep on getting content and wonderful games from my channel. Remember, stay fundamental, stay tactical, And this is Fundamental Tactics signing off. Oh, wait, one more thing. I forgot. I'll just give a preview of maybe what my next video will be. Right now I'm reading Pump Up Your Rating by Axel Smith, and I might make a small review on this book. It just depends how I'm feeling. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will be sure to catch you in the next one.